The fluorescent lights of the Maricopa County Courthouse flickered overhead as 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez sat perfectly still on a hard wooden bench. Her small hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white from the pressure. Her dark brown eyes, once bright and full of childhood wonder, now stared blankly at the gray tile floor beneath her feet. She hadn't spoken a single word in 93 days. Maria Rodriguez sat beside her daughter, one protective arm wrapped around Emma's thin shoulders. Maria's eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, evidence of countless sleepless nights spent worrying about her child. She glanced at her watch for the 100th time that morning. In less than an hour, Emma was scheduled to testify in the most important criminal trial their neighborhood had seen in years. But how could a child who wouldn't speak possibly take the witness stand? "Mija," Maria whispered softly, using her favorite term of endearment. "Would you like some water? Maybe a snack from the vending machine?" Emma didn't respond. She didn't even blink. It was as if her daughter had retreated so far inside herself that the outside world could no longer reach her. Detective Sarah Chen paced the hallway outside the courtroom, her cell phone pressed firmly against her ear. At 34, she was one of the youngest detectives in the Phoenix Police Department, known for her tenacity and unwavering dedication to victims. This case, however, was testing her in ways she'd never experienced. "We're running out of options," she said into the phone, frustration evident in her voice. "The trial starts in 45 minutes and Emma still won't talk. The prosecutor is panicking. Without her testimony, Marcus Delgado walks free." On the other end of the line, Officer Marcus Webb listened carefully. At 42, Webb was a veteran of the force with 20 years of experience. But his most important partner wasn't human, it was Thor, a 5-year-old German shepherd with extraordinary abilities. "I'm 10 minutes away," Webb assured her. "Thor's with me. If anyone can reach this little girl, it's him." Detective Chen ended the call and walked over to where Maria and Emma sat. She knelt down in front of Emma, trying once more to make eye contact with the traumatized child. "Emma, sweetie, I know you're scared," Chen said gently. "What you saw that night was terrible and no child should ever have to witness something like that. But the man who hurt Mr. Chen, my uncle, he needs to be held accountable. You're the only one who can help us do that." Emma's expression didn't change. The blankness in her eyes was heartbreaking. 3 months earlier, Emma's life had been normal. She was a second grader at Desert Willow Elementary School, loved drawing pictures of butterflies, and giggled constantly with her best friend, Sophia. Every evening, she would wait at Chen's corner store while her mother finished her shift as a cashier. Mr. Chen, the elderly owner, always gave Emma a lollipop and let her help him organize the candy display. September 14th had started like any other evening. Emma sat on the stool behind the counter, coloring in her butterfly coloring book. Mr. Chen was restocking shelves. The bell above the door chimed as 2 men entered. Emma remembered glancing up briefly, noticing the snake tattoo that coiled around one man's neck. What happened next would haunt Emma for months to come. The man with the snake tattoo, later identified as Marcus Delgado, pulled out a knife and demanded money from the register. Mr. Chen, at 73 years old, had survived too much in his life to be intimidated easily. He refused. The confrontation escalated quickly. Delgado grabbed Mr. Chen, slamming him against the wall. His accomplice started shouting. Emma froze behind the counter, hidden from view but witnessing everything. The violence that followed was brutal. Delgado stabbed Mr. Chen twice before fleeing with his partner. Emma's screams finally brought Maria running from the back storage room. She found her daughter cradled over Mr. Chen's bleeding body, sobbing hysterically. Mr. Chen survived, but barely. He spent 6 weeks in the hospital and would carry the scars forever. Emma, however, had sustained different wounds, the invisible kind that don't show up on X-rays or CT scans. After that night, Emma stopped talking. Child psychologists diagnosed her with selective mutism brought on by severe trauma. She attended therapy 3 times a week. She took medication to help with nightmares. Nothing worked. The words were trapped inside her, locked away behind walls of fear and horror. The courthouse doors swung open, and Officer Marcus Webb strode in with confident purpose. Beside him, moving with graceful precision, was Thor. The German Shepherd was magnificent, 85 pounds of muscle, intelligence, and something more elusive: compassion. His dark eyes surveyed the hallway with calm awareness, and his tail swayed gently behind him. Webb had spent 3 years training Thor not just in standard police work, but in specialized victim support. Thor had worked with domestic violence survivors, assault victims, and traumatized children. He had an inexplicable gift for sensing human pain and responding with exactly the comfort needed. Detective Chen rushed toward Webb, relief flooding her features. "Thank God you're here. She's right over there with her mother. Marcus, I don't know what else to do. The prosecutor is ready to dismiss her as a witness. The defense attorney is practically celebrating." Webb nodded, his expression serious. He'd read Emma's case file thoroughly. He knew what she'd witnessed. He also knew that Thor had helped children through similar trauma before. "Let me try," Webb said simply. As he approached Emma and Maria with Thor walking calmly at his side, Webb noticed something crucial. The defendant, Marcus Delgado, was being led past them in handcuffs and leg shackles, escorted by 2 bailiffs toward the courtroom. Emma saw him. Her entire body went rigid. The blank expression shattered, replaced by pure terror. Tears began streaming down her face, and her breathing became rapid and shallow. She was having a panic attack. Maria pulled Emma closer, whispering desperate reassurances that weren't working. Detective Chen moved to intervene, but Webb held up his hand, stopping her. Thor had already sensed the crisis. Without any command from Webb, the dog moved forward slowly, his body language completely non-threatening. He approached Emma with the patience of a creature who understood suffering. His ears were relaxed, his tail wagging softly, his eyes radiating something that looked remarkably like kindness. Emma's trembling hand reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against Thor's thick, soft fur. The moment of contact was electric. Something shifted in Emma's expression. The terror didn't disappear entirely, but it softened. Her breathing began to slow. Her fingers curled deeper into Thor's coat. For the first time in 93 days, a spark of life flickered behind Emma's eyes. Officer Webb exchanged a meaningful glance with Detective Chen. Neither spoke, afraid to break the fragile connection forming between girl and dog. Maria watched in amazement as her daughter, her silent, unreachable daughter, leaned forward and pressed her face into Thor's neck. The dog stood perfectly still, accepting Emma's embrace with gentle dignity. His tail continued its slow, rhythmic wag. Minutes passed. The courthouse bustled around them, but in that small space, time seemed suspended. Finally, Emma pulled back slightly and looked directly into Thor's eyes. She didn't speak, but Webb saw something he recognized from years of experience, the first crack in the wall of trauma: hope. "We have a chance," Webb whispered to Chen. "A real chance." The courtroom doors would open soon. The trial would begin. And somehow, with Thor's help, maybe, just maybe, Emma Rodriguez would find her voice again. Officer Marcus Webb had seen many things in his 20 years with the Phoenix Police Department. He'd witnessed courage and cowardice, violence and compassion, despair and redemption. But nothing had prepared him for the profound connection he'd discovered between traumatized humans and specially trained dogs. Thor wasn't just his K9 partner, he was a healer with fur. Webb watched as Emma continued to stroke Thor's coat, her small fingers moving rhythmically through the thick German Shepherd fur. The panic attack had subsided, replaced by something resembling calm. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was progress. After 3 months of absolute silence, any change was significant. "How does he do it?" Maria asked, her voice thick with emotion. She'd been watching the transformation in her daughter with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. How does he know exactly what she needs? Webb knelt down beside Thor, his hand resting on the dog's strong back. Honestly, I've worked with Thor for 3 years and I still don't fully understand it. We trained him in victim support techniques, desensitization to courtrooms, remaining calm under stress, responding to emotional distress. But this, he gestured toward the gentle way Thor was leaning into Emma, providing physical support without overwhelming her. This is something else. This is instinct, empathy. Whatever you want to call it, Thor's got it in spades. Detective Sarah Chen checked her watch again. 28 minutes until the trial began. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Morrison, emerged from the courtroom with deep concern etched across his face. He was a seasoned attorney with a reputation for winning difficult cases, but this one was slipping through his fingers. "Detective Chen, we need to talk," Morrison said, his voice low. He glanced at Emma, then pulled Chen aside. "Judge Morrison is losing patience. The defense is arguing that bringing in an untrained witness, especially a child who can't speak, is a waste of the court's time. They're pushing to proceed without Emma's testimony." "That's exactly what they want," Chen shot back, anger flashing in her eyes. "Marcus Delgado knows Emma is the only eyewitness who saw his face clearly. The security footage is grainy. My uncle's testimony isn't enough. He was being attacked and his memory of specific details is compromised. Without Emma, Delgado walks." Morrison ran his hand through his graying hair. "I know. Believe me, I know. But unless something changes in the next 20 minutes, the judge is going to rule that Emma is incompetent to testify due to her psychological condition." Webb had been listening to this conversation while keeping his attention on Emma and Thor. He stood up, his jaw set with determination. "Give me 15 minutes with her, and I'll need permission for Thor to enter the courtroom." Morrison's eyebrows shot up. "A dog? In Judge Morrison's courtroom? She runs one of the strictest courtrooms in Maricopa County. She barely tolerates emotional displays from humans, let alone animals." "Then we'll have to convince her," Webb said firmly. "Because right now, Thor is the only thing standing between Emma and complete psychological shutdown. If we force her into that courtroom alone, we'll lose her completely. But with Thor," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "with Thor, we might have a chance." Detective Chen looked at her watch, then at Emma, then back at Morrison. "Do it. Request an emergency hearing with the judge. I'll take full responsibility." Morrison hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "I'll need 5 minutes to present the motion. Officer Webb, you'd better have something compelling to say to Judge Morrison, because she's going to think we've all lost our minds." As Morrison disappeared back into the courtroom, Webb turned his attention fully to Emma. He sat down cross-legged on the floor beside her, bringing himself to her eye level. Thor repositioned himself, lying down with his head resting on Emma's lap. "Emma," Webb began softly, "my name is Marcus. I'm a police officer, but I'm also Thor's best friend. We've been working together for a long time, helping people who have been through scary things. Thor's really good at his job. Do you know why?" Emma didn't respond verbally, but her eyes flickered toward Webb's face for just a moment before returning to Thor. "Thor's good at his job because he's not afraid of scary feelings," Webb continued. "When someone is sad, he sits with them. When someone is scared, he stays calm so they can feel safe. And when someone has something really important to say but can't find the words," he paused deliberately, "Thor waits. He's very patient. He'll wait as long as it takes." Maria watched this interaction with tears streaming down her face. For 3 months she tried everything: begging, pleading, bribing, comforting. Nothing had worked. Yet here was this police officer and his dog, and her daughter was actually responding. The courtroom doors opened again and a bailiff stepped out. "Officer Webb, the judge will see you now. You have 5 minutes." Webb stood, gave Thor a hand signal to stay with Emma, and followed the bailiff inside. The courtroom was imposing: high ceilings, dark wood paneling, and an elevated bench where Judge Patricia Morrison presided with stern authority. At 62, Judge Morrison had 30 years of judicial experience and a reputation for running her courtroom with an iron fist. She did not suffer foolishness gladly. The defense attorney, Richard Castellano, stood with his arms crossed, a smug expression on his face. Beside him sat Marcus Delgado, the defendant, looking confident. They both knew the prosecution's case was falling apart. "Officer Webb," Judge Morrison began, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "Ada Morrison has just presented me with what I can only describe as an unusual request. He wants to allow a police dog into my courtroom as an emotional support animal for a 7-year-old witness. I'm going to give you exactly 3 minutes to explain why I shouldn't deny this motion immediately." Webb stood tall, his years of experience testifying in court serving him well. "Your Honor, with respect, I'm not asking for an unusual accommodation. I'm asking for a necessary one. Emma Rodriguez hasn't spoken in 3 months due to severe trauma. Every therapist, psychologist, and counselor has tried to reach her. All have failed. Until today." "And what changed today?" the judge asked, her tone skeptical. "Thor, Your Honor, my K-9 partner. In the past 45 minutes, Emma has made more progress with Thor than in 3 months of professional therapy. She's not speaking yet, but she's present. She's engaged. She's beginning to trust again." Castellano jumped in immediately. "Your Honor, this is nothing but theatrical manipulation designed to generate sympathy for the witness. Dogs have no place in serious legal proceedings. This sets a dangerous precedent." "Mr. Castellano," Judge Morrison interrupted, "I'll decide what sets precedent in my courtroom. Officer Webb, continue." Webb pulled out his phone and showed the judge several documents. "Your Honor, Thor is certified through the National Police Dog Foundation with specialized training in victim support. He's worked with 12 traumatized witnesses over the past 2 years. 10 of them successfully provided testimony with his assistance. There's growing research showing that facility dogs significantly reduce anxiety in vulnerable witnesses, particularly children." Judge Morrison studied the documents carefully. The courtroom was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, she looked up, her expression thoughtful. "I've been a judge for 30 years, she said slowly. "I've seen witnesses break down, refuse to testify, lie under oath, and everything in between. I've also seen children traumatized by having to face their abusers in court. If this dog can help Emma Rodriguez feel safe enough to tell the truth, then I'm inclined to allow it." Castellano sputtered in protest. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "Mr. Castellano, many things in my courtroom are irregular when circumstances demand it. Here's my ruling. The dog may remain with the witness during testimony. However, Officer Webb, if this animal causes any disruption whatsoever, barking, moving around, any distraction, he will be removed immediately. Understood?" "Completely, Your Honor. Thor is trained to remain perfectly still and silent during proceedings." "Very well. We'll take a 15-minute recess to allow the witness and the dog to acclimate to the courtroom environment. Officer Webb, use that time wisely." As Webb exited the courtroom, he felt both relief and tremendous pressure. They'd cleared the first hurdle, but the real challenge lay ahead. Could Emma actually find her voice? Or would the pressure of the courtroom, the presence of her attacker, and the weight of everyone's expectations prove too much? He returned to the hallway where Emma still sat with Thor, her small body curled against the dog's larger frame. Detective Chen and Maria both looked at him expectantly. "The judge approved it," Webb said. "Thor can stay with Emma during her testimony." Maria gasped, fresh tears flowing. "Thank God, thank God." "But," Webb cautioned, kneeling down beside Emma again, "this is just the beginning. Emma, in a few minutes we're going to walk into that courtroom together. You, me, your mom, Detective Chen, and Thor. You'll sit in a special chair called the witness stand, and Thor will lie right at your feet. The whole time, He won't leave you." Emma's fingers tightened in Thor's fur. "Some people are going to ask you questions," Webb continued gently. "You don't have to answer if you're not ready, but if you are ready, if you can find the words, Thor will be right there with you, every single second." For the first time, Emma looked directly at Webb. Her eyes were still frightened, but beneath the fear he saw something else, a tiny flame of courage beginning to kindle. Detective Chen's phone buzzed. The bailiff was ready for them. The moment of truth had arrived. The walk from the hallway to the courtroom felt like miles, though it was barely 50 feet. Emma's small hand clutched her mother's tightly, while her other hand remained buried in Thor's thick fur. Officer Webb walked on Emma's other side, his presence solid and reassuring. Detective Sarah Chen followed behind, silently praying that this unprecedented experiment would work. As they approached the heavy oak doors, Emma's steps faltered. Her breathing quickened. Through the narrow window in the door she could see inside, the rows of wooden benches, the American flag hanging in the corner, the elevated judge's bench that seemed to loom over everything. And there at the defense table sat Marcus Delgado, the man with the snake tattoo, the man who had stabbed Mr. Chen, the man from her nightmares. Emma's legs locked. She couldn't move forward. Thor immediately sensed the change. The German shepherd stopped walking and positioned himself directly in front of Emma, blocking her view of the courtroom. He sat down, his intelligent, dark eyes focused completely on the frightened child. His tail swept slowly across the floor, left, right, a gentle, hypnotic rhythm. "It's okay to be scared," Webb whispered, crouching down beside Emma. "Fear doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. But you know what makes you strong? Choosing to be brave even when you're terrified. And you don't have to be brave alone. Thor's going with you. I'm going with you. Your mom's going with you. We're all right here." Maria knelt down too, her face level with her daughter's. "Mija, I know this is the hardest thing anyone has ever asked you to do. If you can't do it, I'll still love you just the same. Nothing will change that. But Mr. Chen, the man who gave you lollipops and let you help with the candy display, he's counting on you. And that bad man in there, he needs to answer for what he did." Emma's eyes glistened with tears, but she didn't look away from Thor. The dog remained perfectly still, his presence an anchor in her storm of fear. The bailiff opened the door. "The judge is ready." They entered the courtroom in a small procession. Every eye in the room turned to watch them. The jury box, filled with 12 citizens who would decide Marcus Delgado's fate, leaned forward with curiosity. Several jurors' expressions softened when they saw the small child holding onto the large dog. Assistant District Attorney James Morrison stood at the prosecution table, his hands gripping the edge nervously. Everything hinged on the next 30 minutes. Defense Attorney Richard Castellano sat back in his chair with calculated confidence, certain that a 7-year-old trauma victim would crumble under pressure. Marcus Delgado himself watched with cold, calculating eyes. The snake tattoo on his neck seemed to writhe in the courtroom lights. When Emma glanced in his direction, she immediately looked away, her face draining of color. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding." Judge Morrison entered and took her seat, surveying the unusual scene before her with a measured gaze. She'd presided over thousands of cases in her 30-year career, but this was certainly a first, a child witness with a police dog. "Please be seated," the judge said. "Officer Webb, please escort the witness to the stand." The witness stand was positioned to the left of the judge's bench, elevated several feet above the courtroom floor. Small wooden steps led up to it. To Emma, those steps might as well have been Mount Everest. Webb guided Emma forward slowly. Thor walked beside her, matching her pace exactly. When they reached the steps, Webb gently lifted Emma and placed her in the witness chair. It was far too large for her small frame. Her feet dangled several inches above the floor. Thor immediately lay down at the base of the witness stand, positioning himself so Emma could see him clearly. The court clerk, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, approached with a children's Bible. "Sweetheart, I need you to place your hand on this book. Can you do that for me?" Emma's hand trembled as she placed it on the Bible. "Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" For a long moment, Emma didn't respond. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Castellano shifted in his seat, preparing to object. But then, almost imperceptibly, Emma nodded her head. "Let the record show the witness nodded affirmatively," Judge Morrison said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Ada Morrison, you may begin." James Morrison stood and approached the witness stand carefully, as if Emma were a frightened bird that might fly away at any sudden movement. He'd prosecuted hundreds of cases, but none had ever felt this fragile. "Good morning, Emma," he began softly. "Can you tell us your name?" Silence. Emma stared down at Thor, her fingers gripping the edge of the wooden chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. The dog's tail moved slightly, that same gentle, rhythmic motion. Left, right, left, right. "Emma, I know this is scary," Morrison continued, "but I need you to help us understand what happened on September 14th. Can you do that?" More silence. A juror coughed. Someone in the gallery shifted in their seat. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Castellano rose to his feet. "Your Honor, I object to this entire proceeding. The witness is clearly unable to testify. We're wasting the court's time and the jury's time. I move to have this witness dismissed and her testimony stricken from." "Sit down, Mr. Castellano," Judge Morrison interrupted sharply. "The witness has been on the stand for less than 2 minutes. I'll determine when we've given her sufficient opportunity to testify." Castellano sat back down, but a satisfied smirk played at the corners of his mouth. He knew what everyone else in the courtroom knew. Emma Rodriguez wasn't going to speak. The prosecution's entire case was collapsing in real time. Morrison tried again, his voice even gentler. "Emma, can you tell us where you were on the evening of September 14th? Emma's eyes never left Thor. The dog continued his calm, steady presence, occasionally blinking but otherwise remaining completely still. Webb had trained him for exactly this scenario, but even Webb felt the tension mounting. They were losing her. "Were you at Chen's corner store?" Morrison pressed gently. "Nothing." "Did you see something scary that night?" "Still nothing." Detective Chen, sitting in the front row of the gallery, felt her heart sinking. Her uncle's attacker was going to walk free because a traumatized child couldn't overcome her fear. It wasn't Emma's fault. No one could blame a 7-year-old for being terrified, but the injustice of it burned through Chen's chest like acid. Maria watched her daughter with tears streaming down her face, silently willing Emma to find strength but knowing she couldn't force it. Trauma didn't work that way. Healing didn't work that way. 5 minutes passed, then 7, then 10. Morrison had exhausted every gentle approach he could think of. He glanced at Judge Morrison, silently asking for guidance. The judge's expression was sympathetic but firm. There was only so long she could allow this to continue. "Emma," Morrison tried one final time, "is there anything at all you can tell us about what happened that night?" The courtroom held its collective breath. Delgado leaned back in his chair, practically radiating smug confidence. His attorney had already begun gathering his papers, preparing for what looked like an inevitable victory. Emma's lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked down at Thor, and the dog looked back up at her with those impossibly understanding eyes. Something passed between them in that moment, some wordless communication that transcended species. Judge Morrison sighed deeply and was about to speak when Emma moved. She leaned forward in the oversized chair, her small body stretching toward Thor. Everyone watched, transfixed, as the little girl brought her face close to the dog's ear. The courtroom went completely silent. Not a single person moved. Even the court reporter's fingers froze above her stenography machine. Emma's lips moved. She was whispering something, but it was so quiet that no one could hear. Her mouth was almost touching Thor's ear, and whatever she was saying was meant only for him. Officer Webb strained to listen, but he was standing several feet away and couldn't make out the words. Detective Chen leaned forward in her seat. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. The jury members craned their necks, desperate to hear. Emma pulled back slightly, took a deep breath, and whispered again into Thor's ear. This time, in the absolute silence of the courtroom, two words carried across the space like a lightning bolt. "I'm ready." The impact was instantaneous and electric. Maria burst into tears, her hand clutched to her chest. Detective Chen gasped audibly. Officer Webb's eyes widened in shock. These were the first words Emma had spoken in 93 days. Several jurors' mouths fell open in surprise. Morrison froze, barely daring to believe what he just heard. Judge Morrison leaned forward in her chair, her experienced composure cracking to show genuine astonishment. Even Castellano's confident expression faltered. He exchanged a quick, worried glance with Delgado, whose smug smile had completely disappeared. Emma sat back up in the witness chair. Her hands were still shaking, and tears still streamed down her face, but something fundamental had shifted. The wall of silence that had imprisoned her for 3 months had just developed its first crack. She looked at Thor one more time, and the dog's tail wagged slightly as if to say, "I'm proud of you. You can do this." Then Emma Rodriguez turned her face toward the prosecutor, and, in a voice barely above a whisper but clear enough for everyone to hear, spoke her third word in 3 months. "Yes." Morrison's heart hammered in his chest. The entire case, justice for an elderly man who'd been brutally attacked, accountability for a violent criminal, the future safety of their community, all of it hung on what happened in the next few minutes. "Yes," Morrison repeated gently, hardly daring to push further but knowing he had to. "Yes, you can tell us what happened." Emma nodded, then whispered again, "Yes." Her voice was growing stronger, word by precious word. The miracle everyone had hoped for was beginning to unfold. The courtroom remained frozen in that extraordinary moment. Emma Rodriguez, the silent girl who hadn't uttered a sound in 93 days, had just spoken 3 words. 3 simple words that carried the weight of 3 months of trauma, fear, and imprisoned truth. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the magnitude of what was happening. Assistant District Attorney James Morrison felt his hands trembling slightly as he gripped his legal pad. He'd prosecuted cases for 19 years, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever felt as crucial as this moment. He needed to proceed carefully, gently, like a surgeon performing delicate surgery. One wrong word, one hint of pressure, and Emma might retreat back into silence forever. "Emma," Morrison began, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile breakthrough. "Thank you for being so brave. Can you tell us your full name?" Emma's eyes darted from Morrison to Thor, then back again. Her small chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. Thor remained perfectly still at her feet, his dark eyes fixed on her with unwavering support. The German shepherd's presence radiated a calm certainty that seemed to flow upward into Emma like an invisible lifeline. "Emma, Maria, Rodriguez," she whispered, each word separated by a pause as she gathered courage. Several jurors wiped their eyes. One woman in the jury box pressed her hand to her chest, visibly moved. Even the court reporter, a veteran of 15 years who'd witnessed countless testimonies, blinked back tears as her fingers captured every precious word. "That's wonderful, Emma," Morrison encouraged gently. "And how old are you?" 7. The word came slightly easier this time, though Emma's voice remained thin and fragile. "Where do you go to school?" "Desert Willow Elementary." 4 words together now, gaining momentum. Morrison knew he needed to establish rapport before moving to the traumatic events. "What grade are you in?" "2nd grade." Emma's hand dropped down from the chair, her fingers finding Thor's fur. The moment she touched him, her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Do you have a favorite subject in school?" "Art." A tiny hint of something almost like a smile ghosted across Emma's face. "I like to draw butterflies." "Butterflies are beautiful," Morrison agreed warmly. "Emma, do you know why you're here today in this courtroom?" The almost smile vanished instantly. Emma's face paled and her breathing quickened again. Her fingers tightened in Thor's coat. The dog, sensing the shift in her emotional state, adjusted his position slightly, pressing closer to the witness stand. "Yes," Emma whispered after a long pause. "Can you tell us where you were on September 14th of this year?" Emma's voice dropped even lower. "At the store." "Which store, Emma?" "Chen's corner store," she swallowed hard, "where my mama works." Morrison glanced at his notes, though he'd memorized every detail of this case months ago. "Why were you at the store that evening?" "Waiting for Mama. She had to finish her shift. I always wait there. Mr. Chen gives me lollipops." Emma's voice cracked on the last word and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "He's nice to me." "Where were you specifically in the store while you were waiting?" "Behind the counter, on the stool. Mr. Chen lets me sit there and color." "What were you doing while you waited?" "Coloring my butterfly book." Emma's breathing was becoming more labored, and Officer Webb noticed the signs of rising panic. He caught Morrison's eye and made a subtle gesture, "Slow down." Morrison nodded imperceptibly. "That sounds nice. Were you alone at the counter?" "No, Mr. Chen was there. He was putting cans on the shelves. Soup cans, I think." "What time was this, Emma? Do you remember?" "After dinner time. Mama said she'd be done at 8 o'clock. It was almost time." Morrison took a deep breath. This was the moment. "Emma, while you were coloring at the counter, did something happen?" Silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Emma stared down at Thor, and the dog gazed back at her with those impossibly understanding eyes. In the gallery, Maria pressed both hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Detective Chen sat rigid, barely breathing. At the defense table, Marcus Delgado shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, his confident facade showed cracks. His attorney, Richard Castellano, watched Emma with growing concern. The little girl was actually going to testify. "Emma," Morrison prompted gently, "did something happen that night?" "Yes," the word was almost inaudible. "Can you tell us what happened?" Emma's whole body began to shake. Webb instinctively stepped closer to the witness stand, his presence providing additional support. Thor remained motionless except for his tail, which continued its gentle, rhythmic movement. "The door opened," Emma began, her voice trembling. "The bell rang. It always rings when people come in." "What happened after the door opened?" "Two men came in. They looked angry, mean." "Can you describe these men, Emma?" Emma's eyes squeezed shut for a moment. When she opened them, they were filled with terror, but she continued speaking. "One was tall, really tall. He had a black jacket. The other one, he had a tattoo, a big snake, on his neck." Several jurors' eyes immediately went to Marcus Delgado's neck, where the distinctive snake tattoo coiled visibly above his collar. Delgado's jaw clenched. "What did the men do when they came into the store?" Morrison asked. "The one with the snake tattoo walked up to Mr. Chen. He said—" Emma paused, struggling. "He said bad words. He told Mr. Chen to give him money." "What did Mr. Chen do?" "He said no. He told them to leave his store." Emma's voice grew slightly stronger as she recounted Mr. Chen's courage. "He wasn't scared. He told them to get out." "What happened then, Emma?" This was the crucial moment. Emma's breathing became rapid and shallow. Her fingers dug into Thor's fur so tightly that Webb worried she might hurt the dog, but Thor didn't flinch. He pressed even closer, offering his solid, reassuring presence. "The man with the snake grabbed Mr. Chen," Emma said, her words coming faster now, as if she needed to get them out before her courage failed. He pushed him against the wall, hard. Mr. Chen's head hit the wall and he made a sound, a hurt sound. Where were you when this was happening? Behind the counter. I was hiding, but I could see everything. Morrison's voice remained gentle but clear. Emma, what did the man with the snake tattoo do next? He was yelling, so loud. His friend was grabbing things, putting them in a bag, cigarettes and scratch-off tickets. But the snake man kept yelling at Mr. Chen about the money from the cash register. Did Mr. Chen give them the money? No, Emma's voice filled with a child's admiration for the brave old man. He said no again. He tried to push the man away. And then. She stopped. The words were trapped again, lodged somewhere between her memory and her voice. The entire courtroom waited, suspended in unbearable tension. Thor made a small sound, not quite a whine but a gentle vocalization that drew Emma's attention back to him. Their eyes met and something passed between them. The dog seemed to be communicating wordlessly. You're safe. I'm here. You can do this. And then the man pulled out a knife, Emma continued, her voice barely a whisper but steady. It was silver. It caught the light from the ceiling and he stabbed Mr. Chen. In the stomach. I saw it. I saw the knife go in. Maria's sob echoed through the courtroom. Detective Chen's hands clenched into fists. Several jurors looked away, overcome with emotion. Morrison let the moment settle before asking his next question. How many times did he stab Mr. Chen, Emma? Twice. The first time in the stomach. Mr. Chen fell down and then, Emma's voice broke but she pushed through. And then the man stabbed him again, in the shoulder. There was blood, so much blood. What did you do when this happened? I screamed. I couldn't stop screaming. My mama came running from the back room. The men ran away. They ran out the door and the bell rang again. Emma, this is very important, Morrison said, his voice grave with the weight of what came next. The man with the snake tattoo who stabbed Mr. Chen. Do you see that man in this courtroom today? Every eye in the room turned to Emma. This was the moment of identification, the crucial testimony that would make or break the prosecution's case. Castellano sat forward in his chair, ready to object to any ambiguity. Emma's face drained of all color. Her breathing became rapid gasps. For a terrifying moment, Webb thought she might faint. Her hand clutched at her throat and she made a small, desperate sound. But then she looked down at Thor one more time. The dog gazed up at her with absolute faith, absolute confidence. His tail wagged gently, left, right, that familiar, comforting rhythm. Emma took a shuddering breath. Then, with a trembling hand, she pointed directly at Marcus Delgado. Him, she said, her voice suddenly clear and strong. That man right there, with the snake on his neck. He's the one who stabbed Mr. Chen. I saw him do it. I saw everything. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Morrison banged her gavel once. Order. Delgado's face had gone pale. All his earlier confidence evaporated. Castellano was already whispering urgently in his client's ear. The jury members stared at Emma with expressions ranging from sympathy to horror to fierce determination. Morrison nodded slowly, letting the identification sink in for the jury. Let the record show that the witness has identified the defendant, Marcus Delgado. Emma slumped back in the oversized chair, completely exhausted. She'd done it. After 23 minutes of testimony, she'd done what seemed impossible just an hour earlier. She'd found her voice, faced her nightmare, and spoken the truth. And through it all, Thor had never left her side. Officer Webb felt pride surge through his chest, pride in Emma's incredible courage, and pride in his remarkable partner who had somehow, impossibly, helped a traumatized child reclaim her voice. The hardest part was over. Emma had testified. Now justice could finally be served. The deliberation lasted only 4 hours. After Emma's powerful testimony, supplemented by security footage, forensic evidence, and Mr. Chen's own account of the attack, the jury had little doubt about Marcus Delgado's guilt. When the foreman stood to read the verdict, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread throughout the courthouse about the remarkable girl and her police dog companion. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Marcus Delgado, guilty. Maria Rodriguez collapsed into Detective Sarah Chen's arms, sobbing with relief. Emma, sitting in the gallery with Officer Webb and Thor beside her, didn't fully understand the legal terminology, but she understood one thing. The man who had hurt Mr. Chen would be punished. She buried her face in Thor's fur, and the dog pressed close to her, sensing her emotional release. On the count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant guilty. Delgado's head dropped. His attorney sat motionless, knowing there would be an appeal, but understanding that Emma's testimony had been devastating. The snake tattoo on Delgado's neck seemed to mock him now. The very marking that had made him identifiable had sealed his fate. On the count of armed robbery, we find the defendant guilty. Judge Patricia Morrison accepted the verdict with solemn dignity. 2 weeks later, she would sentence Marcus Delgado to 15 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for at least 10 years. But the story that began in her courtroom that day was just beginning to unfold in ways no one could have anticipated. Sitting in the back of the courtroom was Sarah Jennings, a reporter for the Arizona Republic. She'd been covering crime in Phoenix for 12 years and had seen countless trials, but Emma's testimony had moved her to tears. After the verdict was read, she approached Officer Webb in the hallway. "Officer Webb, I'd like to write a story about what happened here today," Jennings said, her notepad already out. "That little girl's courage and your dog's role in helping her testify, it's remarkable. Would you be willing to talk to me?" Webb hesitated. He was a private person by nature, and Thor was a working police dog, not a publicity tool. But something made him reconsider. If it helps other traumatized witnesses know there are options, then yes, I'll talk to you. The article appeared on the front page of the Arizona Republic 3 days later. Brave girl finds voice through police dog. 7-year-old's testimony secures conviction in brutal attack. Jennings had captured every emotional detail. Emma's 93 days of silence, Thor's calming presence, the moment she whispered, "I'm ready," into his ear, and her courageous identification of her attacker. Within hours, the story went viral. News outlets across Arizona picked it up first. Then national networks discovered it. By the evening of the article's publication, CNN, NBC, ABC, and CBS were all running segments on their evening news broadcasts. The footage they used, carefully edited to protect Emma's privacy, showing only the back of her head and Thor beside her, played on televisions across America. Social media exploded. The hashtag #ThorTheDog began trending on Twitter. On Facebook, the Arizona Republic's post about the story was shared over 100,000 times in 24 hours. Instagram filled with photos of German shepherds with captions like, "Not all heroes wear capes, some have 4 legs and fur." Officer Webb's phone rang constantly. The Phoenix Police Department's Public Information Office was inundated with media requests. Police Chief Rebecca Martinez called an emergency press conference for the following day, with Webb, Thor, Maria, and Emma, if she chose to attend, invited to participate. The response wasn't just emotional, it was practical. Webb began receiving emails from prosecutors in cities across the country. A district attorney from Seattle wrote, "We have a 6-year-old witness in a domestic violence case who won't speak. Can you help us?" A victim advocate from Miami asked, "How was Thor trained? Can we replicate this program?" The Phoenix Police Department's K-9 unit commander, Lieutenant James Rodriguez, saw opportunity in the overwhelming response. He called Webb into his office 2 days after the verdict. "Marcus, the chief wants to expand this," Rodriguez said. gesturing to the stack of letters and emails covering his desk. "She's proposing we create an official K-9 victim support program. You'd be the director. We'd get funding for at least 3 more dogs, maybe more. This could change how we handle traumatized witnesses across the entire department." Webb felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Sir, I appreciate the confidence, but training dogs for this kind of work, it's not simple. It takes years to find the right temperament, the right personality. Not every police dog can do what Thor does." "I know that," Rodriguez replied. "That's exactly why we need you leading this. You understand the nuance. You know what to look for. Marcus, what happened in that courtroom, that wasn't just a one-time miracle. That was the result of 3 years of careful training, dedication, and your partnership with an extraordinary animal. We need to systematize it, expand it, make it available to more victims." Webb looked down at Thor, who lay patiently at his feet as always. The dog gazed back with those intelligent eyes. "What do you think, partner? Ready to train some new recruits?" Thor's tail wagged. The press conference the next day drew media from across the nation. Chief Martinez stood at a podium bristling with microphones, flanked by Officer Webb, Thor, Detective Chen, and Maria Rodriguez. Emma had chosen not to attend. The attention was overwhelming for a 7-year-old, but she'd recorded a short video message that was played on the screens behind the podium. "My name is Emma," her small voice said as her image appeared on screen, her face obscured for privacy. "I was really scared to talk about what I saw, but Thor helped me be brave. He stayed with me and made me feel safe. If other kids are scared like I was, maybe a dog like Thor can help them too." The room full of hardened journalists dabbed at their eyes. Chief Martinez announced the creation of the Phoenix Police Department K-9 Victim Support Program, with an initial budget of $200,000. 3 additional dogs would be acquired and trained over the next year. Officer Webb would lead the program while continuing his regular duties. But the story didn't stop there. By the end of the week, the video of Emma's message had been viewed over 5 million times on YouTube. News segments about Thor and Emma had reached an estimated 30 million viewers across various networks. The Phoenix Police Department's website crashed from traffic as people from around the world tried to learn more about the program. Donations began pouring in, unsolicited contributions from people who wanted to support the program. A retired schoolteacher from Boston sent $500 with a note, "For Thor's program, so other children can find their voice." A tech company CEO from Silicon Valley contributed $50,000. Within 2 weeks, the program had received over $300,000 in private donations, enough to expand beyond the initial 3-dog plan. Other police departments reached out, wanting to create similar programs. The Seattle Police Department committed to training 2 victim support dogs. Miami followed suit. Within a month, departments in Houston, Philadelphia, Denver, Chicago, and Los Angeles had all launched initiatives to train dogs for working with traumatized witnesses. Officer Webb found himself thrust into an unexpected role as an educator and consultant. He developed a training curriculum, created assessment protocols for selecting appropriate dogs, and began traveling on weekends to help other departments establish their programs. Thor accompanied him to every training session, serving as the model that other handlers aspired to achieve. The impact rippled outward in unexpected ways. Law schools began discussing the use of facility dogs in courtrooms as part of their trial practice courses. Psychology departments studied the phenomenon, with researchers at Arizona State University launching a formal study on the effectiveness of K-9 support for traumatized witnesses. The American Bar Association formed a committee to examine best practices for incorporating service animals into legal proceedings. 6 months after the trial, Officer Webb received a letter that brought tears to his eyes. It was from a prosecutor in Portland, Oregon, describing how a victim support dog named Justice had helped a 5-year-old boy testify in a child abuse case. The boy had been silent for 8 months. With Justice beside him, he found his voice, and his abuser was convicted. "Your work with Thor saved more than Emma Rodriguez," the prosecutor wrote. "It's saving children across this country. Thank you for showing us what's possible." But perhaps the most meaningful moment came 3 months after the trial, when Emma and Maria visited Mr. Chen at his recovered store, Chen's Corner Store, now reopened after months of repairs and recovery. Mr. Chen, still moving slowly but healing, embraced Emma with tears in his eyes. "You are so brave, little one," he said in his accented English. "You helped put bad man away. You saved me by being brave." Emma smiled, a real, genuine smile, her first in months. "Thor helped me," she said simply. "He made me brave." Mr. Chen looked at Officer Webb and Thor, who had accompanied Emma for the visit. "Then I thank Thor too. He is a very good dog, the best dog." As if he understood, Thor's tail wagged enthusiastically, and he accepted Mr. Chen's gentle pat on the head. Standing in that corner store, surrounded by the people whose lives had intersected in trauma and healing, Officer Webb realized something profound. Thor hadn't just helped solve one case or save one little girl. He'd sparked a movement that would change how the justice system treated its most vulnerable witnesses for generations to come. From silence to voice, from fear to courage, from one dog and one girl to a national transformation. The ripple effects of that whispered "I'm ready" were still spreading outward, touching lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. 6 months after the trial, Emma Rodriguez sat cross-legged on the floor of a small community center on the south side of Phoenix. Beside her, Thor lay with his head resting on her lap, his eyes half closed in contentment. Around them, 5 other children sat in a circle, each paired with a specially trained support dog. This was the first official group session of the expanded K-9 victim support program, and Emma had volunteered to be part of it. "Emma," said Dr. Lisa Chen, no relation to Mr. Chen, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery, "would you like to tell the group how you're feeling today?" Emma stroked Thor's soft ears thoughtfully. 6 months ago, she couldn't have answered such a question. 6 months ago, she couldn't speak at all. Now, while still shy and sometimes hesitant, she could find her words when she needed them. "I still have bad dreams sometimes," Emma said quietly, her voice steady. "But not as much as before. And when I wake up scared, I think about Thor. I remember how safe I felt with him in the courtroom, and it helps me calm down." A 10-year-old boy named Marcus, ironically sharing the same name as Officer Webb, nodded vigorously. He'd witnessed a domestic violence incident where his father had attacked his mother. He'd been silent for 2 months before meeting a golden retriever support dog named Hope. "I do that too," Marcus said. "When I get scared at school or can't sleep, I picture Hope's face and I feel better." This was exactly what the program was designed to do: create lasting therapeutic connections between traumatized children and support animals that could help them process and overcome their experiences. Dr. Chen had been brought on as the program's lead psychological consultant, working alongside Officer Webb to ensure the dogs weren't just providing temporary comfort but facilitating genuine long-term healing. "The research is clear," Dr. Chen had explained to the police department's leadership during a presentation 2 months earlier. "Children who experience trauma often struggle with verbal expression. They quite literally cannot find the words to describe what happened to them. But animals, particularly dogs, provide a non-judgmental presence that can lower anxiety enough for those words to emerge. The bond that forms isn't just emotional, it's therapeutic." Emma's twice-monthly visits with Thor had become the cornerstone of her recovery. Officer Webb, now juggling his regular duties with his new role as program director, made sure to keep these appointments sacred. Every other Tuesday afternoon, he and Thor would arrive at Emma's modest apartment in their working-class neighborhood. Emma's face would light up the moment she heard Thor's familiar footsteps in the hallway. During these visits, they'd often just sit together, Emma doing homework or drawing her beloved butterflies while Thor lay beside her. Sometimes they'd talk about the trial, processing the experience bit by bit. Other times they'd talk about school, friends, or Emma's dreams for the future. Officer Webb never pushed. He'd learned that healing happened on its own schedule, not according to anyone's timeline. Maria had started a support group for parents of child witnesses, meeting every Thursday evening at the St. Mary's Community Center. What had begun as 4 parents sitting awkwardly in a circle had grown to 18 regular attendees. Officer Webb brought Thor to every meeting, and the dog's presence seemed to ease the adults' pain just as it did the children's. I blamed myself for months, Maria shared during one meeting, her voice thick with emotion. I kept thinking if only I hadn't had Emma wait at the store that night, if only I'd arranged different childcare, if only. She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. But watching her recover, seeing her smile again, learning to laugh again, it's taught me that we can't change what happened. We can only help our children heal from it. Other parents nodded in understanding. A father named Robert, whose daughter had witnessed a school shooting, spoke up. My daughter Sophia works with a dog named Peace now. She's a border collie and she's incredible. Sophia hasn't just started talking again. She started painting. She paints pictures of Peace, and her therapist says it's helping her process the trauma through art. The program had expanded faster than anyone anticipated. By the 6-month mark, the Phoenix Police Department had 5 fully trained victim support dogs: Thor, Hope, Justice, Peace, and a newcomer, a Labrador retriever named Courage. Each dog had been carefully selected for temperament, then put through an intensive 6-month training program that Officer Webb had developed based on his work with Thor. The training was rigorous and specific. The dogs learned to remain absolutely still and quiet in stressful environments. They were desensitized to courtroom settings, the harsh lighting, the echo of voices, the tension in the air. They learned to read human emotional states with remarkable accuracy, responding to subtle cues like changes in breathing patterns or body language. Most importantly, they were trained to provide comfort without becoming a distraction. Not every dog can do this work, Webb explained to a group of visiting handlers from the Los Angeles Police Department. You need animals with naturally calm temperaments, high emotional intelligence, and the ability to remain focused despite distractions. Out of every 10 candidates we evaluate, maybe 2 have what it takes. The success stories were mounting. 8-year-old Sofia Martinez, who had witnessed her neighbor being attacked, had testified successfully with justice by her side, leading to a conviction. 6-year-old David Kim, traumatized after seeing his grandfather suffer a fatal heart attack during a robbery, found his voice with Hope's help. 11-year-old Isabella Torres, the oldest witness in the program so far, had overcome selective mutism with Peace's support and helped put away the man who had assaulted her mother. Emma had become something of an inspiration to these other children. Dr. Chen, with Emma and Maria's permission, sometimes shared Emma's story in general terms during group sessions. There was a girl who couldn't speak for 93 days, she'd say. She was so scared, so hurt by what she'd seen, but she found a friend with 4 legs and a gentle heart, and that friend helped her find her voice again. If it happened for her, it can happen for you. But healing wasn't linear or simple. Emma still had setbacks. There were days when she woke up from nightmares, screaming for her mother. There were times at school when a sudden loud noise would send her into a panic attack. There were moments when the trauma felt as fresh as the day it happened. On one particularly difficult day, 3 months after the trial, Emma had a severe episode at school. A student had slammed a locker door, and the sound had transported Emma back to that terrible night. The violence, the blood, the screaming. She'd collapsed in the hallway, hyperventilating and nonverbal once again. The school counselor called Maria, who immediately called Officer Webb. Within 30 minutes, Webb and Thor arrived at Desert Willow Elementary School. They found Emma curled up in the counselor's office, rocking back and forth, completely unresponsive to the adults trying to comfort her. Thor entered the room and went straight to Emma. He didn't wait for permission or commands. He simply lay down beside her and rested his head on her lap. Emma's eyes, which had been squeezed shut, slowly opened. Her breathing began to slow. Her hands, which had been clenched into fists, gradually relaxed and found their way into Thor's fur. 20 minutes later, Emma was speaking again. The episode had passed, but it had taught everyone involved an important lesson. Recovery from trauma wasn't a destination you reached and then stayed at forever. It was an ongoing journey with ups and downs, progress and setbacks. Dr. Chen incorporated this incident into her training materials for the program. The dogs aren't magic, she explained to new handlers. They don't cure trauma. What they do is provide a consistent, reliable, non-judgmental source of comfort that helps victims access their own resilience. They're tools for healing, not miracle workers. But in the hands or paws of a skilled handler, they're incredibly powerful tools. The program began attracting academic attention. Researchers from 3 universities approached Webb about conducting formal studies on the effectiveness of K9, assisted testimony and trauma recovery. The early data was promising. Children in the program showed significantly faster recovery times, higher rates of successful testimony, and better long-term psychological outcomes compared to children receiving traditional therapy alone. Emma participated in one such study, with Maria's full consent. The researchers were particularly interested in her case because her recovery had been so well documented. They conducted cognitive assessments, measured her stress responses, and interviewed her about her experiences. Thor makes the scary things less scary, Emma explained to one researcher, her 7-year-old wisdom cutting through academic jargon to the heart of the matter. When I'm with him, I remember that there are good things in the world, not just bad things. He helps me remember that I'm safe now. By the 9-month mark, Emma was thriving in ways that seemed impossible during those dark months of silence. She'd rejoined her school's art club and was creating beautiful butterfly paintings. She'd reconnected with her best friend Sophia and was having sleepovers again. She still saw her therapist weekly, and she still had her twice-monthly visits with Thor, but the frequency of her nightmares had decreased dramatically. Officer Webb watched Emma's transformation with quiet pride. He'd helped dozens of victims over his career, but there was something particularly meaningful about seeing a child reclaim her childhood after trauma had tried to steal it. During one visit, as Emma and Thor sat together on her apartment's small balcony watching the sunset paint the Phoenix sky in shades of orange and pink, Emma turned to Webb with a serious expression. "Officer Webb," she said thoughtfully, "when I grow up, I want to help kids like Thor helped me. Maybe I could train dogs or be a police officer or something. I want to help scared kids be brave." Webb smiled, deeply moved. "Emma, I think you're already helping scared kids be brave. Every time you show up to group sessions, every time you share your story, you're showing other children that healing is possible. You're proof that even when things seem darkest, there's always hope." Emma considered this, then nodded. She looked down at Thor, who gazed back at her with his trademark gentle expression. "Thank you, Thor," she whispered, hugging the dog tightly. "Thank you for saving me." Thor's tail wagged slowly, and he licked Emma's cheek once, a gentle, affectionate gesture that made her giggle. In that moment on that balcony, with the desert sun setting and a little girl laughing again, the true purpose of the K9 Victim Support Program crystallized. Not just justice, but healing. Not just testimony, but recovery. Not just courage for one moment, but resilience for a lifetime. 2 years after Emma Rodriguez whispered, "I'm ready," into Thor's ear, Arizona State Representative Linda Torres sat in her legislative office reviewing a stack of research documents, news articles, and testimonial letters. The pile had grown so large it covered half her desk. Each piece told a similar story. traumatized witnesses, particularly children, finding their voices with the help of specially trained support dogs. Torres had a personal stake in this issue. 5 years earlier, her own daughter, Melissa, had been the victim of a violent assault. Melissa had struggled for months to testify, ultimately breaking down on the witness stand and being unable to complete her testimony. The case had fallen apart. The perpetrator had walked free. That failure haunted Torres every single day. If this program had existed when Melissa needed it, Torres said to her chief of staff, David Chen, maybe things would have been different. Maybe she wouldn't have spent 3 years in intensive therapy. Maybe she'd have gotten the justice she deserved. David nodded sympathetically. He'd worked for Representative Torres for 6 years and knew the pain that motivated her advocacy for crime victims. So you're serious about introducing legislation? Absolutely. Torres picked up a particularly compelling letter from a prosecutor in Tucson. The Phoenix program has been operational for 2 years now. The data is undeniable. 87% of witnesses who work with support dogs successfully complete their testimony, compared to 43% of traumatized witnesses without support. The conviction rate in cases with K9-assisted testimony is 64% higher. This isn't just feel-good policy, it's effective criminal justice reform. Over the next 3 months, Torres drafted comprehensive legislation that would mandate certified support dogs be available in all Arizona courtrooms for vulnerable witnesses. The bill, which she called Thor's Law in honor of the dog who started it all, included funding provisions for training programs, handler certification requirements, and guidelines for which witnesses qualified for K9 support. The legislative process moved surprisingly quickly. Torres had expected resistance. There were always concerns about costs, logistics, and precedent. But the story of Emma and Thor had captured the public's imagination so completely that opposing the bill became politically untenable. On a crisp March morning, Representative Torres held a press conference on the steps of the Arizona State Capitol to announce the bill's introduction. The event drew massive media coverage. Television cameras from local and national networks lined the plaza. Reporters from newspapers across the state crowded forward with their recorders. Standing beside Torres were Officer Marcus Webb, Thor, Detective Sarah Chen, Maria Rodriguez, and most significantly, Emma herself. Now 9 years old, Emma had grown into a confident, articulate child who understood the power of her story. She wore a blue dress her mother had made specially for the occasion, and she held Thor's leash with pride. 2 years ago I couldn't talk, Emma said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong despite her nervousness. Cameras flashed continuously, capturing every moment. I saw something really scary and the words got stuck inside me. I wanted to help catch the bad man, but I was too afraid. Then I met Thor. She reached down and patted the German shepherd's head. Thor, now 7 years old and a seasoned veteran of public appearances, sat with dignified calm. Thor didn't make the scary things go away, Emma continued, speaking words she'd practiced with her mother and Dr. Chen. But he made me feel safe enough to talk about them. He helped me be brave when I didn't think I could be. And now, because of him and Officer Webb and all the other support dogs, lots of other kids don't have to be as scared as I was. They can have a friend like Thor to help them too. The crowd of onlookers, which included not just media but concerned citizens, victim advocates, and law enforcement officials, erupted in applause. Several people wiped tears from their eyes. Emma's mother wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulders, beaming with pride. Representative Torres took the microphone next. Thor's Law will ensure that every vulnerable witness in Arizona has access to certified support dogs during legal proceedings. This isn't just about children. It's about any witness suffering from trauma, anxiety, or psychological conditions that make testimony difficult. It's about ensuring that our justice system doesn't fail victims because they're too frightened to speak. The bill moved through committee hearings with remarkable bipartisan support. Republicans appreciated the law and order implications. Higher conviction rates meant safer communities. Democrats valued the trauma-informed, compassionate approach to victim support. Crime survivors' advocacy groups lobbied heavily in favor. Law enforcement organizations endorsed it enthusiastically. Officer Webb testified before the House Judiciary Committee, bringing Thor with him. "In my 22 years of police work," Webb told the assembled legislators, "I've never seen any intervention as immediately effective as K-9 victim support. These dogs don't just help witnesses testify, they help them heal." The program in Phoenix has assisted 47 witnesses over 2 years. 41 of them successfully testified. That's an 87% success rate in cases where traditional approaches had failed. He paused, letting the statistics sink in. "But beyond the numbers, I've watched traumatized children start smiling again. I've seen adults who were paralyzed by fear find their courage. I've witnessed families begin to heal from terrible wounds. That's what this legislation will protect and expand." The Senate Judiciary Committee heard similar testimony from Dr. Lisa Chen, the program's psychological consultant. She presented research data showing measurably reduced PTSD symptoms in witnesses who worked with support dogs, faster recovery times, and better long-term mental health outcomes. "The human-animal bond is powerful," Dr. Chen explained. "Dogs provide unconditional acceptance, which is precisely what trauma survivors need. They don't judge, they don't rush, and they don't expect anything in return. For someone struggling with shame, fear, or self-blame after witnessing violence, that non-judgmental presence can be transformative." On April 17, exactly 2 years and 1 month after Emma's courtroom testimony, the Arizona House of Representatives voted on Thor's law. The result was overwhelming: 91 votes in favor, 4 against, with 5 abstentions. The gallery erupted in cheers. Emma, watching from the visitors section with her mother and Thor, clapped her hands with joy. 3 weeks later, the Senate passed the bill by a vote of 27-3. Governor Jennifer Martinez, a former prosecutor who had long advocated for victims' rights, scheduled a public signing ceremony for the following month. The ceremony took place on a sunny May afternoon in the governor's ceremonial office. Cameras captured every moment as Governor Martinez sat at an ornate wooden desk, surrounded by the bill's supporters. Emma stood directly beside the governor, with Thor sitting at attention next to her. Officer Webb, Representative Torres, Detective Chen, and Maria Rodriguez flanked them. Today, Arizona becomes the first state in the nation to mandate courthouse facility dogs for vulnerable witnesses, Governor Martinez announced, her voice ringing with conviction. This legislation represents a fundamental shift in how we approach justice, recognizing that getting to the truth sometimes requires providing extraordinary support to those who have witnessed extraordinary trauma. She picked up an official signing pen. "Emma Rodriguez, would you like to help me sign this bill into law?" Emma's eyes widened with surprise and delight. She stepped forward, and the governor guided her small hand holding the pen across the signature line. Together, they completed the signature that would make Thor's law official state policy. The room burst into applause. Flash bulbs exploded in rapid succession. Thor, sensing Emma's excitement, stood and wagged his tail enthusiastically. Someone in the back of the room started chanting "Thor, Thor, Thor," and soon the entire room joined in. Officer Webb felt emotion tightening his throat. What had begun as one desperate attempt to help one traumatized child had become state law. Thor's work would now benefit countless future victims. But the impact didn't stop at Arizona's borders. The signing ceremony received national news coverage. By evening, clips of Emma helping sign the bill had been viewed millions of times online. The hashtag Thor's Law trended on social media platforms. Within weeks, legislators in other states began introducing similar bills. California State Senator Robert Kim drafted the Courthouse Facility Dog Act. Texas Representative Maria Sanchez proposed the Vulnerable Witness Support Animal Program. New York, Florida, Illinois, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado all saw companion legislation introduced in their state houses. The movement gained momentum rapidly. Victim advocacy organizations created a national coalition to support Thor's law legislation in all 50 states. The National District Attorneys Association endorsed the concept and published model legislation for states to adopt. The American Bar Association, initially cautious about the precedent, conducted a comprehensive review and ultimately issued guidelines supporting the use of certified facility dogs in legal proceedings. Officer Webb found himself traveling across the country, training handlers and consulting with police departments establishing their own programs. Seattle created a 4-dog program. Miami trained 6 facility dogs. Chicago launched an ambitious 10-dog initiative. Within 18 months of Arizona's Thor's law passing, similar legislation had been enacted in 6 additional states, with another 12 states having bills under active consideration. The academic community took notice. Major research universities launched long-term studies examining the effectiveness of canine-assisted testimony. Publications in psychology, criminology, and legal journals began appearing. The data consistently supported what Officer Webb had observed empirically. Support dogs significantly improved witness testimony success rates and aided trauma recovery. One particularly comprehensive study from Stanford University tracked outcomes for 200 witnesses over 3 years. The findings were striking. Witnesses who worked with facility dogs showed 38% fewer PTSD symptoms 6 months post-testimony compared to control groups. Their testimony completion rate was 89% versus 41%. Perhaps most significantly, their reported satisfaction with the justice process was dramatically higher. They felt heard, supported, and validated rather than re-traumatized by the legal system. By the 3-year anniversary of Emma's original testimony, the movement that began with 1 girl and 1 dog had transformed victim support practices nationwide. Over 300 certified courthouse facility dogs were now working in 42 states. Thousands of witnesses, children and adults alike, had found their voices with canine assistance. Emma, now 10 years old, had become an inadvertent spokesperson for the movement. She spoke at conferences, appeared in documentary films about the program, and corresponded with other child witnesses who drew strength from her story. She'd started a blog called Butterflies and Courage, where she wrote about trauma recovery, always emphasizing Thor's role in her healing. "I never thought what happened to me would help so many other people," Emma wrote in one blog post that went viral. "Something really bad happened and I was really scared. But Thor helped me, and Officer Webb helped me, and my mom helped me, and slowly I got better. Now kids all over the country have dogs like Thor to help them. That makes the bad thing that happened seem a little less bad because something good came from it." Standing in his Phoenix Police Department office, surrounded by certificates of appreciation from law enforcement agencies nationwide, Officer Webb read Emma's blog post with profound satisfaction. Thor lay at his feet, now semi-retired but still making special appearances for cases that needed his particular expertise. What had seemed impossible 3 years ago, helping one silent, traumatized girl find her voice, had sparked a revolution in how America's justice system treated its most vulnerable witnesses. 2 words whispered into a dog's ear had changed the country. 5 years after Emma Rodriguez first whispered, "I'm ready," into Thor's ear, she stood in the Phoenix Police Department's K-9 training facility, holding a leash attached to an energetic golden retriever puppy. The puppy, just 8 months old, tumbled over her own paws in excitement. Her name was Hope II, named in honor of the original Hope, who had recently retired after 4 years of distinguished service. Emma was 12 now, poised on the edge of adolescence. She'd grown taller, her features maturing, but her eyes still held that same determined spark that had captivated a courtroom 5 years earlier. She visited the training facility every Saturday, volunteering under Officer Webb's supervision to help socialize and train the newest generation of victim support dogs. "Gentle Hope," Emma said softly, kneeling down as the puppy jumped up enthusiastically. "Support dogs need to be calm, remember. Let's practice our sitting." Officer Marcus Webb watched from across the training room with a mixture of pride and amazement. Emma had become remarkably skilled at working with the dogs. She had an intuitive understanding of what they needed: patience, consistency, gentle encouragement. Perhaps it came from being on the receiving end of Thor's support. She knew firsthand what these animals would mean to the frightened people they'd eventually serve. Thor himself, now 9 years old and officially retired from active duty, lay in a patch of sunlight near the training room door. His muzzle had grayed, and he moved more slowly than in his prime, but his eyes were still sharp and intelligent. He spent most of his time now at Officer Webb's home, enjoying a well-earned retirement of naps, treats, and playing with Webb's 2 young children. But he still accompanied Webb to the training facility occasionally, serving as a living example for the younger dogs to emulate. "Emma's got real talent," said Officer Rachel Morrison, one of the program's newer handlers. She worked with a border collie named Peace II, training for courthouse facility work. "She understands these dogs better than some officers I've seen with 20 years' experience." Webb nodded. "She learned from the best," he said, gesturing toward Thor. "And she understands the mission on a level most people can't. She knows what it feels like to need these dogs desperately." The K9 Victim Support Program had grown beyond anyone's wildest projections. The Phoenix Police Department now maintained a team of 12 active facility dogs, with 4 more in training. Officer Webb had been promoted to sergeant 2 years earlier, now overseeing not just the Victim Support Program, but the entire K9 Unit's Specialized Services Division. The program's success had transformed his career and his life. He trained over 200 handlers from across the country, and had been invited to speak at international law enforcement conferences in Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia. A documentary about the program, titled Finding Voice: The Thor Legacy, had won awards at film festivals and was now required viewing in many criminal justice programs. But Webb's greatest satisfaction came from moments like these: watching Emma work with Hope II, seeing the direct lineage from one girl's courage to a new generation of support dogs who would help countless others. "Sergeant Webb," called Officer David Kim from the facility's office, "you have visitors." Webb walked over to find a family he didn't recognize: a mother, father, and a small boy who looked about 6 years old. The boy clutched his father's hand tightly, his eyes downcast and fearful. "Sergeant Webb," the mother said, her voice trembling with emotion, "my name is Jennifer Lau. This is my husband Michael, and this is our son Daniel. He witnessed something terrible 3 months ago, a car accident where someone died. He hasn't spoken since. The prosecutor handling the case told us about your program, about Emma Rodriguez and Thor. We drove here from Tucson. We were hopping." Her voice broke. Webb understood immediately. "You're hopping one of our dogs might help Daniel," Webb finished gently. "Let me introduce you to someone who understands exactly what Daniel is going through." He gestured to Emma, who had noticed the family and was already walking over with Hope II. The puppy, sensing the tension, had automatically shifted into a calmer demeanor. Emma knelt down at Daniel's level, her expression kind and knowing. "Hi, Daniel. My name is Emma. When I was 7, I saw something really scary too. I couldn't talk about it for a long time. I couldn't talk at all, actually. Not to anyone." Daniel's eyes flickered up to meet hers, the first sign of engagement his parents had seen in weeks. "But then I met a very special dog named Thor," Emma continued, pointing toward the retired German shepherd dozing in the sunlight. "He didn't make the scary things disappear, but he made me feel safe enough to talk about them, and talking about them made them a little less scary. She gestured to Hope II, who sat patiently beside her. This is Hope. She's still learning how to help people like you and me, people who have seen things they wish they hadn't. Would you like to pet her? Daniel hesitated, then slowly released his father's hand. He reached out tentatively toward Hope II. The puppy, displaying wisdom beyond her months, remained perfectly still except for a gentle tail wag. Daniel's small hand touched the soft golden fur, and something in his rigid posture relaxed slightly. Webb watched this interaction with familiar emotion. 5 years and the cycle continued. Trauma, silence, connection, healing. He'd seen it dozens of times now, but it never stopped moving him. We can arrange for Daniel to work with one of our experienced facility dogs, Webb told the Lau family. Justice would be a good match. He's a Labrador who specializes in young children. We'll coordinate with the Tucson prosecutor's office and Daniel's therapist to create a support plan. Jennifer Lau's eyes filled with tears of relief. Thank you so much. When we heard about Emma's story, it gave us hope for the first time in months. Emma overheard this and looked up from where she sat with Daniel and Hope II. That's what Thor gave me too, she said. Hope. And now I get to help give that to other people. Later that afternoon, as the training session wound down, Emma sat with Officer Webb in his office. Thor had migrated from his sunny spot to lie at Webb's feet, and Hope II was curled up sleeping in Emma's lap. Officer Webb, Emma said thoughtfully, using the title she'd never quite moved past despite his promotions. Do you ever think about that day in the courthouse, when I whispered to Thor that I was ready? Every single day, Webb answered honestly. It changed everything, not just for you but for so many people. Emma nodded, stroking Hope II's soft ears. I've been thinking about my future, about what I want to do when I grow up. And what's that? I want to do this, Emma said, gesturing around the training facility. I want to work with dogs and help people who have been through trauma. Maybe become a handler or a trainer or a therapist who works with facility dogs. I want to do what you and Thor did for me, give people hope when they think there isn't any. Webb felt his throat tighten with emotion. Emma, you're already doing that. Every Saturday when you come here, every time you share your story, every time you sit with a scared child like Daniel, you're already helping people heal. But I want to do more, Emma insisted with the passionate certainty of youth. Thor saved my life. Not literally maybe, but he saved who I was. He helped me find myself again when I was lost. I want to spend my life doing that for others. Then I have no doubt you will, Webb said warmly. You've got at least 6 more years before you're old enough to join the force, but there's no reason you can't keep volunteering here, learning everything you can. By the time you're 18, you'll be one of the most experienced civilian trainers in the country. Emma's face lit up with a smile that reminded Webb of the brave 7-year-old who had changed his life. Really? You'd let me keep helping? Emma, you're not just helping. You're part of the program's heart. You're living proof of why we do this work. That evening, as Webb drove home with Thor dozing in the back seat, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun 5 years ago with one desperate call to help a silent, traumatized child. The program he'd built with Thor had now helped over 800 witnesses across the country. 43 states had enacted some form of Thor's law. Over 400 certified facility dogs were now working in courtrooms nationwide. But the statistics, impressive as they were, didn't capture the real impact. The real impact was in the individual moments. A child speaking for the first time in months, an assault survivor finding courage to face her attacker, a traumatized veteran finally able to testify about war crimes he'd witnessed. Each one a small miracle, made possible by the remarkable bond between humans and dogs. The following week, Emma returned to the training facility for her regular Saturday session. This time, she brought something with her, a framed photograph she'd had printed and mounted. It showed 7-year-old Emma in the courthouse witness stand, leaning down to whisper into Thor's ear. Officer Webb's wife had taken the photo on her phone from the gallery, and though the quality wasn't perfect, it captured the moment that had started everything. "I thought we could hang it in the training room," Emma said shyly, "so all the new dogs and handlers can see where the program started, so they remember why this work matters." Webb accepted the photo with reverence. "That's perfect, Emma, absolutely perfect." He hung it in the training facility's main room, right beside the entrance where every handler and dog would see it daily. Beneath the frame, he mounted a small plaque that read, "I'm ready, Emma Rodriguez, age 7. The two words that started a movement. Phoenix Police Department, K-9 Victim Support Program. Established 2020. Thor, making one of his final visits to the facility before his health would decline further, stood beneath his photograph with Emma beside him. Webb snapped a picture, the 12-year-old girl and the aging German shepherd, together again beneath the image of their younger selves. 5 years, hundreds of witnesses helped, thousands of lives touched, 43 states transformed, all because one frightened little girl found her voice with the help of one extraordinary dog. As Emma hugged Thor gently, careful of his aging joints, she whispered into his ear once more, not "I'm ready" this time, but simply, "Thank you." Thor's tail wagged slowly, and in his wise, graying face, Webb saw contentment. The dog knew. Somehow he understood the legacy he'd created. The sun set over Phoenix, painting the desert sky in brilliant oranges and purples. In training facilities across America, handlers worked with facility dogs preparing for their sacred duty. In courtrooms from Seattle to Miami, traumatized witnesses found their voices with gentle dogs lying at their feet. In therapy sessions and support groups, survivors healed a little more each day with canine companions by their sides. And in one police training facility in Phoenix, a photograph hung on the wall, a reminder that courage comes in all forms, that healing takes unexpected shapes, and that sometimes the most powerful words ever spoken are simply, "I'm ready." The story that began with silence had given voice to thousands. The girl who couldn't speak had taught the nation to listen. And the dog who believed in her had changed the world. The end.